when people are dieting and they're in a calorie deficit for an extended period of time and yo-yoing up and down, is there any research on metabolic damage and anything that's happening? Because you see a lot of this being thrown around, like, hey, you were on 1,000 calorie deficit for years and you screwed up your metabolism. Is there any validity behind that?
So there is some what we call metabolic adaptation with weight loss. So let's say
Mm-hmm.
somebody's 400 pounds and they lose 100 pounds. It takes, as I always say, it takes fewer calories to carry around that 300-pound body
Mm-hmm.
compared to the 400-pound body. So there is absolutely metabolic adaptation with weight loss. And that's where, with that yo yo dieting, that could come into play. And this adaptation, it can't be explained by lean body mass loss only. Like, we know that muscle burns more calories than fat, but that's not the only explanation
Yeah.
according to the literature. So there is some of that that goes on with weight loss. Weight loss is hard. And then the other thing that happens is that our hormones change. So if you're on a lower calorie diet, you're actually going to be more hungry.
Okay, and that's a difference between the ghrelin and leptin response too. And is this just something with estrogen, is testosterone levels? Is that all kind of going into play?
Yeah, leptin and ghrelin, it's basically, are you become more hungry, so it's harder to lose weight. And that's why you see in so many research studies there's weight regain. But if we look at that, even if we look at like the Biggest Loser study, which was published years ago, they're
Hmm.
like, oh, the Biggest Loser contestants, a lot of them regained weight. They did, but they were still lower than their baseline where they started.
Hmm.
So their health actually was still better because they still maintained some of that weight loss.
Okay, and that's fair, right? You go from 300 or 400 pounds, and you'll go back up to 250. I mean, 50 pounds, it's not all going to be fat tissue, of course, right? Which people think they lose a pound on a scale, they lost a bunch of fat. Well, it was a day, didn't happen. Um, we don't need to get into that. But when somebody is yo-yoing and doing that sort of stuff, is there a way to kind of like reverse diet back up, or how would you get back to like a maintenance level? Or would you do some sort of higher carb, higher calorie day, or what would you do?
What I try to do with people, and I've seen one who's actually a healthcare practitioner locally who, you know, testing her metabolic rate, I'm like, it's fairly low for your age, your resting metabolic rate. You need to get out. First of all, you need to lift weights. She doesn't lift weights at all. That's, I would say, number one. You need to lift weights, and then getting her to a calorie level which is has enough total nutrients to meet her nutrient needs. You diet down to 12, 1300, 1400 calories, you're not going to, it's going to be hard to get enough fiber, vitamins, minerals, plant compounds, etc. So getting her up to that and then seeing over time how she'll do, basically. And the tough part here with working with clients, and again, it's very rare I work with anyone from the general population, but we know that diet records are notoriously inaccurate.
Mhm.
So, and people think they exercise more than they do. Thank God we have trackers now, but it makes it
Yeah.
difficult because someone goes, "Oh my gosh, I'm eating 1,400 calories, Marie, and I'm, doing all this exercise." Well, no, you're probably not, because it's not adding up. We tested your resting metabolic rate. This doesn't add up.
Yeah, yeah, and especially those trackers and things, and people like they when I was training in person, like, how many calories do you think we burned during this session? Like, well, I give 45-minute sessions. Yeah, I beat your ass in accordance with what your body can handle, which is a whole nother podcast I should go to. But like, uh, maybe a few hundred. There's going to be a slight metabolic spike for depending on what research you look at. Like, well, about all this, and then they go and chug like a 1,000 calorie protein shake or something like that because they feel like they're gonna lose their gains. And I'm like, okay, no, not not happening.
Or they deserve the food. I'll never forget, my mom told me one time, she did some exercise program when we were kids, and she goes, "Oh yeah, we went to go eat ice cream afterward because we deserved it, Marie." I just started laughing. I mean, she told me this later. I was probably, a teenager. I'm like, that's hilarious, but people do it. The other thing that's interesting about some of the literature, not all, that in a lot of it in overweight or obese people, is they tend to decrease their activities of daily living when they increase exercise and lose
Mm,
weight. So yeah, they're training with Joey. They're burning a few hundred calories in that session, but then the rest of the day they're less active than they were before. They're not getting those forget 10,000 steps. They might not even be getting 4,000 steps a day. They're just, people are become more sedentary.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I just actually just recently read a paper on this. I can't remember. It seems like we have a ceiling, right, based off of the amount of calories, a non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So anybody like walking, tapping, fidgeting, anything, right? So when you see and you work with professional athletes, but when you see an athlete that's high level athlete, often when they're walking around throughout the day where they're moving around, they're slow. And yeah,
Slow.
because why? Because they were on the field for 3 to 6 hours or doing all sorts of things. So their body is saying, dude, slow the hell down because we know you're going to expend more energy. So for what I say, and I would like you to anytime correct me if I'm wrong. I'd appreciate that. Like, hey Joe, you're an idiot. So we don't stop breathing when we're lifting weights. So I think people are always like, oh my God, I need to do cardio, I need to do all this sort of stuff. Well, if you're going to prioritize anything, I really feel like you should prioritize lifting weights. And lifting weights could be your own body weight as well. Resisting training could be variable resistance with bands or chains or push a damn car. I don't care. Well, safely if you can push a car. Right. So do that. You're going to get some cardiovascular benefits out of it. And then just walk around and move more. I know the treadmill makers and things don't want me to say that, but I feel like people are just really overthinking as far as that's concerned.
100%. Yep.
Okay, so is there data on how much we are slowing down as far as our calorie burn when we are exercising more?
There's some data in overweight or obese people, and I don't remember it off the top of my head,
Yeah.
but there is data to show there is some significant slowing. That is not the primary, from the last paper I read, it's probably not the primary factor that's, counteracting,
Yeah.
the weight loss or making it easier to regain weight. But instead, it's again the satiety hormones that, you become more hungry, and then the changes in metabolism.
Okay. Now, why do people need to add muscle? You say muscle, and you did a post on this. Anybody check out Marie's Instagram. It's brilliant, by the way. So you did a post on this about how muscle is talking to fat. Can you explain that?
Yep. So muscle talks to fat tissue, basically when you gain more muscle to basically lose more body fat. And this was from a presentation by Mike Ormsby from Florida State at the NSCA meeting. Great presentation about, hey, weight training can be used as fat loss training. I love that because, as you and I both know, we see so many people, they're like, oh, I got to do 20 more minutes of cardio. I got to do, and I'm not against cardio. I love cardio, but you do, if you can, if you're not injured, get in there and basically lift weights, because you're lifting, the muscles talking to fat tissue to basically mobilize the fat, and then use it, burn it for energy.
Wow. So, I mean, people always, back in the day, they thought that you adding a pound of muscle was like, it was like 40 to 120 calories. I think that was back when Dr. Oz's book came out and he became, real famous and stuff. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. But is it around 6 calories per pound of lean muscle tissue?
Yeah, it's 6. And then for fat, I think it's about 2 calories per day that we burn per pound of fat. So, and yes, that's a significant difference, right? Statistically speaking. But you gain 5 pounds of muscle. What is that, like 20 calories extra a day? It's not, that's 2 sticks of gum about. So, people go, oh, it's a lot. It adds up over time. I'm like, it does. But nutrition's not this exact science where it's like, oh, I am eating exactly 1,800 calories a day. No, you're probably eating somewhere between, I don't know, maybe 1,650 and 1,900 or maybe more. And then again, how much of those calories, how many of those calories do you absorb based on the foods you're eating?
Yeah, and besides let's say the 6 extra calories and the muscle talking to fat, how else does adding lean muscle tissue affect, well, the energy levels, sleep, all sorts of things?
The biggest thing I always say is when you have more muscle, you can go for longer. You're more likely to be more active because instead of, even if you're doing something like gardening, which we know is actually considered exercise, you can actually go out there and use a shovel, use a tiller. You can do some of that hard exercise, so you're burning more calories if you have more muscle tissue. So people can move more, and then your activities of daily living are a little bit more strenuous, right? And then the big thing as we get older is you're going to be independent for as long as possible if you have that muscle to support balance, to support bone health,
Mm,
etc.
okay.